What you saw this afternoon?
I didn't really see much at all. I just heard the gunshots and just dropped down to the ground and just waited for him to stop. And he just wouldn't stop. So I tried to call 911 and I was whispering because I could hear him close by. And when I whispered on the phone to 911, the dispatcher would start yelling at me saying, "Why are you whispering? You don't have to whisper." And I'm trying to tell her, like, "Ma'am, he's in the store. He's shooting as an active shooter. I'm scared for my life." And she said something crazy to me and then she hung up in my face. And I had to call my boyfriend to tell him to call 911.
Well, that is certainly unfortunate, Letitia.
What you...
Oh my God.
Yeah, so here we have, obviously, there was heroism displayed in the store, the security guard who ultimately tried to take down the shooter and was killed. All of the thoughts and prayers to his family and the world. But we also have this evidence, again, that there have been some failures from law enforcement as people in the store were trying to call for help and being told, basically, that they needed to just talk louder as there was an active shooter in their midst. Denise, what do you make of that recording?
I am astounded, even though it's not the first such failure in 911 that I have heard. I think it lends toward a serious, and I do mean serious, conversation and course correction about the institutions that are responsible for what happened in Buffalo and in many other places, because this person is not the first one to do this. We need to talk about the absolute failure of Alejandro Mayorkas and Homeland Security. We need to talk about the failure of government officials who have leaned into this idea about critical race theory and arguing the need to implement anti-racism and explicitly teach our children to not be racist. We need to talk about the ways that Joe Biden himself in his 50 years in public service has befriended racists and legitimized their existence because they didn't call him boy. Right? There are ways that I'm going to find nice words for this. There need to be some serious accountability. Some people need to lose their jobs. Some institutional policies, recruitment, retention strategies need to be adjusted post haste. This 911 center and whatever is happening there, as well as around the country, needs to be among them.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I hate this trend of the political figure, Governor Kathy Hochul was talking about how this is all social media's fault. Well, this is a law enforcement failure. This guy was known to law enforcement, as is often the case, was the case with the Parkland shooter, where there was every failure. The FBI knew about that guy. They didn't do anything. They didn't do the right thing. Don't blame other people. And so listening to that 911 call, just really, really sickening. The callousness, the indifference of the people who are paid, who are by the taxpayers to protect us, to perform emergency service. Just that, it's really sickening. What's your reaction, Max?
Basically that, it is incredibly sickening, and what's even more sickening, or not more sickening, equally sickening, right, is that I fear we're going to do what we always do. We're going to see this as somehow, like a failure that can be fixed by throwing more money at the damn police. Mm-hmm. They got plenty of police. We saw the Buffalo police in full force. Remember when the George Floyd protests were happening? They pushed over that poor old guy whose head split open. We know they got police, right? And so it makes me think of the systematized callousness that is the policing system in this country, and how that connects to the broader kind of historical forces that have created this horrific situation that we're all living in. I look around me. I live in Baltimore, right? Baltimore is a city that spends more on police per capita than any city in the world. And this kind of crap happens every single day. It is not a bug. It is a feature of the system. This is a town that has been economically and policy-wise eviscerated for decades. It is losing population. There there are whole segments of the population, poor, predominantly black, that are policed to all hell. And you have police officers on record and showing repeatedly by their actions that they look at the black citizens of this town like the shooter in Buffalo looks at them, as invaders, as animals, as mongrels to be controlled, to be funneled in to a prison industrial complex that takes them out of society. This is something that we live with every day, and it is something that is, multiple people are responsible for this, to your point, Robbie. And that includes, Joe Biden and the Democrats. That includes the Republicans, not just them. But I wanted to kind of end on that point, because remember when Joe Biden, to Denise's point, he's multiple times kind of longingly talked about the days when you could sit down and have lunch with segregationist legislators and still have that sort of civility. What was happening while y'all were sitting at that table having lunch? People were being lynched at the same time that you were trying to coddle the most reactionary elements in your colleagues and saying, we can sit down, we can compromise here, and people are getting shot up. Stop compromising with this. Stamp it out. Force everyone in elected office to actually take a stand against this, and because this is not going to stop. And Biden, one thing Biden said that was right is that this is a poison, and that poison runs deep in the veins of America. I grew up with proto versions of this, hearing from right-wing talk radio that what the Democrats wanted to do was open the borders, flood the country with illegal immigrants who were going to have anchor babies, who were going to then build an indomitable voting bloc for the Democratic Party. Like, that is batshit stuff, but it was very much mainstreamed, and there are a lot of current legislators who believe that. So this isn't going to go away just by taking Trump off Twitter, by ramping up, censorship on social media. It's not going to help by throwing money at the police. That poison runs deep, and to Denise's point, we need to take a long, hard look at where it comes from and actually be serious about ridding ourselves of it. Otherwise, this terror will persist.